Despite the issue cropping up in the news every few months, the porous nature and numerous infrastructural management personnel issues across South Africa's borders remain unaddressed. Recently, representatives, members of Parliament of South Africa from both National Assembly Defence Oversight Committees, that is the Joint Standing Committee on Defence and the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans, conducted an oversight visit, sort of hands-on, eyes open visit along the Limpopo River. We will link to the full coverage of the visit on DefenceWeb in the description below this video. But joining us to just unpack the visit, some of the findings, and indeed the overall state of South Africa's borders to help us make sense of it, we are joined by Mr. Ricardo Teixeira from the Daily Friend and the Institute of Race Relations. Ricardo, thank you very much for making time once again here on CRA's YouTube channel. Just to start off with, could you give us some context on this latest visit? Do you think the right people were involved? Is this kind of thing, not to say that the right recommendations will come out of it and that action will follow, but is this the kind of step that one needs to figure out, what is going on at our borders and what can and should be done about it?
I think it was a good thing that they went to the border. I think they should have taken them there a lot sooner. I visited the same stretch of border a year ago on a SANDF tour for members of the media. I remember at the time they were saying that the next day would be a ministerial visit. I'm not sure if that happened, but yeah, it would have been good for them to go a bit sooner. I mean, they've already well into their time on the committees, well over a year. But it's a wake-up call. I'm glad that they went, because nothing is, someone can give you a report, but seeing the situation hands-on yourself is always a lot more eye-opening. And it is quite an eye-opening experience. Most people don't know, but the northern border on Limpopo is the Limpopo River. People hear that and assume it's a running river. Usually there's water there on a good year for about 60 days, 2 months of the year, usually during the December to January wet seasons. But for the majority of the year, it's a dry riverbed. You can walk straight through it. It's just a bunch of sand, really, and it's a very difficult place to try and police and to try and control. There's been fences on some sections of the border, but a flash flood comes along and it wipes it out. And the government, I think the last time that happened was in the early 2000s. They decided that they weren't going to rebuild the fence because flash flood comes along again in 2 years and wipes it out again. So it's really a very difficult and porous piece of terrain to try and control.
Ricardo, in the coverage on DefenceWeb and a few other places, there are some quotes after the visit that really stand out, that should give, I think, South African citizens, and of course, not least of which members of Parliament, serious concern here in terms of what needs to be done to address the situation. So the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans, it was the co-chairperson, the chair of that particular committee, Dakota Lekgotle, is quoted as saying, "If we are being honest, we don't have functioning borders, and this puts the safety of our country at risk," end quote. Do you think that's accurate?
I think it's accurate. It's not a functional border. I mean, to say it's a border, it holds people and random wild animals and illicit goods out, as well as the sieve holds water. It's really you struggle to find a section of fence, if you can call it that, because it's really just a stretch of barbed wire longer than 100 meters. In some instances, every 20, 30 meters there's a hole in the fence. In some areas, you go a couple hundred meters and you see no barbed wire. It's a very difficult place to control. It is very porous, and I also think because of the political pressures in Zimbabwe, there's going to be no military solution to this border. I said it. I mean, last year when I was there, the spokesperson for the Department of Defense, Sipiwe Dlamini, was with us, and I told him straight. I said, "There's never going to be a military solution to this. You can deploy every soldier we have, holding hands along the border. You are never going to stop the people from crossing. It is just an incredibly difficult place to control." And I know people have said to me before, we should take a page out of Trump's book and build a wall. You're going to build a wall in the middle of a river? It's not a stable place to build. And even then, people will find a way to go over, to go under, to go through, to borrow from Sesame Street. it's a difficult thing to do, and until you address the root cause of why people are crossing, you are never going to be able to stop them from crossing.
Ricardo, in terms of this latest oversight visit, and of course your experience at our border, if if we could add you to one of these committees, if you could be an MP, if we could, let's assume money is no object, in terms of capacitating SANDF, Border Management Authority, those players from an equipment point of view, maybe from a communications point of view, what do you identify in terms of some of the low-hanging fruit? So let's say, aside from the political solution and addressing the root cause, some of the root causes around this, just making sure that we have as functional and well-maintained border security as possible. What does it come down to in terms of just basic equipment?
Look, if I had to make a couple of changes, the first thing I would do is take SAPs away from the border. They were put there in 2009, and the responsibility was taken away from the Defence Force, and they had their budget and personnel numbers cut. And then in 2014, they reversed the decision, but they never gave the budget allocation back. And a lot of the corruption we see around the border and the ports of entry, if 9 times out of 10 it's SAPs, then perhaps SAPs is the problem. So I would take SAPs out. The Border Management Authority's mandate is to patrol the area within 12 nautical miles of the coast and 12 kilometers inland from the border. So that 12-kilometer stretch from the border south, I would build a fence and a very robust infrastructure network of fences and outposts along the border, but I would build specifically the fence part at the 12-kilometer south line to create a buffer zone along. Now, towns like Musina and privately held lands would unfortunately fall in this area, but those personnel will be, and citizens will then be noted or brought into a system that, okay, we know you live in this area, you're going to be moving in a lot, you're going to get, you're not going to go have to pay through every time, but I would basically create a 12-kilometer stretch of border area, like a buffer zone. There is already on the east side of Musina and Beitbridge, there's the Swartpansberg military area, which is already there. But I would extend it on the west side as well, and I would build the infrastructure to maintain that area. It's going to be a lot of trouble. There is going to come up the argument of where to expropriate land to build that fence. But I think that it is a necessary cost to do because you can't build it along the river. It's just never going to be possible. So I would create that buffer zone because it allows you to create an area where, unless you are authorized to be in that area because you live there or you work there, you can start basically saying, okay, show me your passport or your ID if you're not someone that lives in this area or works in this area or passing through and have the right documents. Because now a lot of the problem is that the Border Management Authority is only around the ports of entry and the military is only along the actual border line. But once people get past them, they're reliant on the highway patrol and SAPS patrols along the arteries to try and catch people. As soon as they get past that first kilometer, usually they're scot-free. So it would deal with that issue. Then the second step would be closer towards the actual river line. It would be what I call the wall of sensors approach, which is something that Brazil has done along their western border in the Amazon, because it's another area where you just cannot build anything. I forget the name, but they have a specific acronym for it. But it's a wall of sensors approach. So they use ground radar, which can pick up a person walking from 10 kilometers, and it can differentiate between a vehicle, a person, and a wild animal. But it can also, if you place it on higher ground, it can also extend its range in terms of picking up aerial targets as well. Now we have a locally developed radar that fits this portfolio. It's the RSR 90 or 900, I think, from Rotec Radar Systems. It already exists. They also have another sensor package, which is a mobile antenna thing that kind of sits on a trailer, and you can deploy it around. It's a two-wheel trailer that you can move around that has a siren on it. It's got motion detectors, and it's got cameras on it. And I would bring VumaCam in to build that camera network along the border, because they've got very robust their artificial intelligence on their camera software. It's very good at target tracking, recognition, and differentiating between a static object, an animal, and a car, and a person. So I bring that in as well. And then CSIR has something called the Meerkat, which was developed and deployed in the Kruger Park to track poaching. which can do a 400-kilometer square area, and it's a long-range thermal camera that can pick up a poacher at 20 kilometers. So the high ground south around Musina and those areas that overlook the border, I would place some of these sensors of the Meerkat and the mobile unit from Reutech. I'd place them along with some of these fixed locations for the surface radar, and then create outposts where you put certain amounts of soldiers and BMA officials with vehicles, and from that point they cover a certain stretch of border between them and the next outpost on either side, where they do foot patrols at night, they do quick response with vehicles, but then also outside of that 12-kilometer zone set up a rapid reaction base, probably out of Musina military base, with helicopters. So and then also launching drones out of Air Force Base Ricardo. So ideally you would have 24/7 over the border, at least 3 drones in the air surveilling areas, underground fiber optic that can pick up if someone is pressing over that the riverbank shore, that someone has crossed over here. All of the sensors in that area begin looking in that direction. It picks up movement on the radar. It starts tracking that movement. Thermal cameras start seeing, where can I pick them up? It alerts the nearest outpost. They dispatch a foot patrol if it's nearby. If it's too far and vehicles can't go there, then the rapid reaction airborne unit can come and basically intercept people within that 12-kilometer buffer zone before they then enter South Africa. And this would, again, there's no physical fence right on the border. It would be a more intelligence-focused approach, and it's all with locally available solutions. And I think we would need a special border unit on the Defence Force side. Currently, right now, they have ad hoc units where they take 2 reserve companies and 2 full-time companies, active components. But they really only have 1 battalion, and the Zimbabwe border stretch on Limpopo, that only gets 1 infantry company right now, whereas a special tailored unit for that section should probably be around a battalion size on its own, broken up into the outpost units, units that are manning the sensors at a control station, and then the rapid reaction units.
I think very much one needs a multi-layered sort of mutually reinforcing system in this particular instance.
Along the border that cross the border, so they'll focus on those areas and the legitimate ports of entry, but the land in between will then be for the military, but also a buffer area around, because right now they at Beitbridge is mainly where you see the BMA, and at the other ports of entry like Oshuk and I mean I don't know all the names of them, but Beitbridge is the only 24/7 one with Zimbabwe, but 500 meters on either side is about the extent to which the BMA operates. So they have their own drones, they have their own teams, but I would extend their capability to about a 2-kilometer range and overlap their patrols with that of SANDF, and create a joint command on that border area. But again, I think step number 1 is get SAPs out of the mix.
Ricardo, a final question just around, not least of which the many problems on the border with Zimbabwe, but with Mozambique. And here, ask you a little bit. Effectively, you're going to write a strategic intelligence report for the CRA, unpacking some of the issues from a military security point of view as regards Mozambique. We see continually the potential, not just the potential, but we see flaring up of unrest, of issues, especially in northern Mozambique. If you could give us just a kind of key takeaways or key overview of the state of our border with Mozambique, given so many South African companies that operate, not least of which in South Africa close to Mozambique, but have business exposure, supply chains, value chains throughout Mozambique. If things escalate, and we already see we can't deal with border issues regards Zimbabwe, but if things escalate with Mozambique, I think there's serious implications for South African businesses who operate, and then the sort of influx potentially of refugees coming into South Africa.
So a big thing with the Mozambique border is a huge chunk of it is the Kruger Park. So a lot of people try to cross through the Kruger Park. I have a contact in the Special Ranger Unit who, early in the year after the political unrest in Maputo and around the elections that happened last year, There was a lot of traffic coming through the park, and he remarked that the lines were getting fat. A lot of people were trying to get through the park on foot. But the border with Mozambique is, again, it's just like the border with Zimbabwe. It's incredibly difficult terrain. You've got a lot of granite hills. My in-laws live very close to the Lubombo Gate, and you have the military base, they call it Macadamia Base at Komatipoort, which is right there. But unlike the Zimbabwe border, where it's the entire stretch of border is a river, at Lubombo, you've got granite hills to the north and the northwest. And then they cross over into Mozambique on the northeast. And then you have I believe it's southwest to northeast running snaking river through the canyon, which again, it's a constant flowing river. And it's filled with crocodiles, and it's not a place you can build a fence. And then you've got this incredibly difficult mountainous rocky terrain where you just in essence have giant rocks that are very round and smooth to walk over, and then very dense bush. So it's a very difficult terrain. On the other side, where it's with KZN, there it's a bit more sandy, and again you have a river, but the river is only halfway. So the river is running east to west, and then eventually starts snaking northwards, and then it just becomes a straight line across a map. But it's again very dense jungle terrain. It's very difficult. It's more of a wetland. It requires more of a mountain and jungle approach than the border with Zimbabwe, but it is again a very difficult terrain. There's not a lot of high ground on the KZN side. There's a lot of high ground on the South Africa with the Mpumalanga and Mozambique side. But again, you could use a very similar approach, but you'd have to tailor it specifically along those sections. It is, again, incredibly porous. They've tried to build a physical wall on the KZN side. It hasn't worked. What they started with was the areas through the swampy terrain where you can move vehicles through. They started just putting big concrete blocks and rocks to stop vehicles, but eventually they found a way around. I haven't been to that side of the border. I've been to Lubombo, and Lubombo is a very difficult place to again, because when you come through the crossing, the river's right down there. You got rocks over there, rocks over there. It kind of feels like you're being forced through a channel, but it is again a very porous one. With the prison break that happened in Maputo, a lot of people managed to escape, and some of those escapees ended up being interviewed by ENCA in Midrand, and they said, yeah, it was very easy to get across the border. So it's a very difficult one. I think most of our northern borders, particularly with Mozambique and Zimbabwe, are very porous and very difficult terrain to control.
Very much so. I think in stark terms, you've laid out the current state of things, current sort of state of operations, if we can call them operations, but also what's at stake. And I think obviously a good step into what I mentioned earlier, so that the members of parliament went to do the oversight committee. But let's see now what kind of action follows from this, what kind of prioritization can happen. But,
my big concern is with the state of the Mozambique border and the political instability in Mozambique. At the current capacity at the Lubombo side, and because you drive through Lubombo to get to Maputo, that's the main route. It's another 24-hour one. With the state of the infrastructure around there, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a massive political disruption in Mozambique that easily within a month 1 million people could cross that border illegally, and we wouldn't be able to stop them.
Yeah, very, very much so. But I think we're going to wrap up there. So, Ricardo, thank you very much for helping us make sense of quite a complicated and stark situation. We really appreciate it. To all of you who joined us, thank you very much once again for joining us. If you haven't yet, before you leave, please like this video. We also invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We welcome any kind of that support. It helps boost the algorithm. So please just drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Center for Risk Analysis. Take care.